Hey guys, it's Brian from Haas. Today I'm here with Jay from LMC, and we're going to talk about a variety of subjects. We're going to talk about LMC and their history in the machine tool industry, of course their relationship with Haas Automation, both in terms of a supplier, some of their parts here, and as a user of Haas Automation. And then we'll just talk about machining in general and Jay's involvement in the industry. You've been in the machine tool industry for a long time, as has LMC. What have you seen that's changed, either for better or worse, either way? Let's just say in the last 20, 30 years since Haas has been in business.
Sure. Over the last 20, 30 years, the adaptation and the prevalence of CNC machine tools has grown exponentially. It's funny, everybody thought manual chucks would go away. Manual chucks are still used to this day.
Oh, yeah.
Different things along those lines. I think the biggest thing that we've continued to see is obviously the speeds and the feeds and the accuracies increase exponentially over time. The software and the controls, I mean, the process of machining is still machining.
Right.
But obviously 5-axis work, different materials that we're working in, different things along those lines. But I think the biggest function of that has been the workforce and what's changed in the workforce and what's required. I mean, this used to be a job that, oh, well, you know, I could go work in a machine shop. It's a dirty environment.
Right.
You know, it's not fun. It's not exciting and all that. And the technology that we have today rivals anything out there.
It does.
It's not a dirty environment in most cases. It's high tech. It's really one of those things that we've seen, you know, with productivity increases, whereas it used to take, for example, 5 guys from 5 different machines, you know, one guy can run 3 machines now because the machines have become so smart.
Yep.
You know, they've been able to sit down there with, whether it's, you know, understanding tool life management, you know, and things along those lines where you don't have to necessarily sit in front of one machine. You can kind of let it go and then work on several other machines. So, you know, we've seen that in our own shop, whether or not it's, you know, bringing on automation is trickled its way down. That used to be a really scary thing,
oh, yeah.
especially for, you know, smaller shops, and even smaller shops now are taking on automation out of necessity.
I was just going to say it's a necessity because every customer, I do a lot of customer tours still, every customer comes in here without a question, says their biggest problem is getting qualified help.
Yeah, and that's too bad, and I think that, you know, we partner with our local HFO and supporting the high school, supporting the Gene Haas, the tech center, and the
Yep.
school with Vincennes, because we're starting to see those kids come out and people come out and graduate and have those skills.
Yep.
But we had such a skills gap that, you know, finally it's catching up and
Yeah,
it's getting
but there
better.
were so many years with that gap.
Yeah, it's, you know, if you don't plant seeds, you don't have corn.
So,
you know?
so we do a lot of group tours here, and we have a lot of schools. We even go down to, in some cases, elementary school. But high school in particular, when we do a tour with a school, we do a PowerPoint. We open with a slide of jobs in the CNC industry, and we show them the salaries. And you can see their eyes, they're like, whoa, I had no idea you could make that much money in manufacturing.
Right.
Because as you said, everybody still thinks machine shop, it's dirty, it's manual work, it's not skilled labor. But I think the tide's changing, just like you said, people are realizing.
Without a doubt, and my first exposure and how I got into this industry is that I was working in high school. It was a summer job, and I started basically working in the what we called the storeroom, which was pulling parts, and you would have people pull the parts off to the job and send it out to the floor
Okay.
for assembly.
Yep.
and things along those lines. And so every summer I kind of came back, and as I learned more and I saw the parts, and you'd see these machines running around and all that, I said, well, I'd really like to try that. So, you know, every year I would continue to move along and try, you know, to learn a different machine, and that's really kind of how I came along, you know. And again, it started from, you know, it's cliche, but I was pushing a broom and pulling parts.
Yeah, you start at the ground floor.
You start at the ground floor, and then you see these parts that are being made, and it's really, it's become such a neat process. You know, I think that, you know, if you have any mechanical, you know, I mean, guys that like to work on their cars and build
Yep.
things and such like that, you know, it was a natural inquisitive thing for me.
Right.
to want to learn more about it.
I'm engineer by background, started out at a different place before Haas and designing brakes for race cars.
Okay.
And what I got lucky because when I was doing design work and just, didn't know what I was doing, we had a manual machinist. He was from Romania, old school, went through the apprenticeship, the whole bit. I would design something and he'd come walk in his machine shop. His room was just one wall away. He'd come over and he'd go, "Brian, how am I supposed to machine this?" So, and his name was Louis. And I'd say, "Geez, Louis, I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I don't really know much about machining." And so he would drag me out, and it was all manual. He had a Bridgeport and some kind of manual lathe, and he would show me why he could not machine what I just designed, and that's how I learned.
Yeah.
And so I quickly graduated from that because I gained a bunch of machining knowledge, and I became the fixture designer for the company. So I got exposure to the machine shop. So I started building just basic fixturing for mills and graduated to horizontal machines and building tombstones and hydraulic clamping and all sorts of anything to make the operator's job easier and make things go quicker.
Sure. Well, that's a classic. If you're not, if you're actually designing and building your own parts, the design engineers a lot of times can design things that are just unmanufacturing.
Yes.
Tolerance stack ups and things along those lines.
Right.
If you're trying to hold a tolerance, like, well, I'm going to stack this up 3 different times. I'm going to clamp it 3 different ways, and you're wanting me to hold this tolerance.
Right.
We can have the greatest machine tool in the world.
We always refer to it's a recipe, right?
Yeah.
It's like making a cake or cookies or whatever.
Right.
There's multiple ingredients in the recipe, and the machine's just one of them.
Right.
So, not to say that we never have problems with our machines, because obviously that wouldn't be true, but the vast majority, not to say that hey, I can't hold tolerance on this part. Say, okay, well, let's go back and let's look at your programming, let's look at your tooling, let's look at your work holding.
Sure.
And more times than not, we find that the problem is not with the machine itself, but it's somewhere else, like their work holding.
Yeah, or just the geometry of the tools you're trying to run.
Yep.
The coatings that you can do
Right.
nowadays. But you've got to always start with a good, just like your machine tool. Always, it's on a solid foundation. You've got to start with a good foundation. And if that part isn't securely located, clamped, and repeatable,
Yep.
then you're going to struggle with it all day long. And that's everybody looks at these beautiful, huge machines and they think, oh, it's super cool and all that. And they forget that somebody's going to have to actually figure out how to clamp this. They're going to have to hold it too. And,
Right.
And so that's pretty important.
Okay, so one of the unique things about LMC is you guys are not only a supplier to Haas, but you're also a Haas customer.
Correct.
So tell me about the first Haas machine that you guys got and why you got it, because it's a really interesting story.
It was almost by default and by accident. We're a Midwestern company. We kind of have some, what I would consider we're lucky in the sense that most of the people in our company, I think the last guy that retired had 48 years. We don't have a lot of turnover. So we've got a lot of industry knowledge and history and all that. But I think sometimes in the same way, people kind of get, what I would say, stuck in their ways, or this is how I've been doing it.
Yep.
This is how we're going to continue to do it. And so, we had a bigger, vertical machining center, boxway machine, and such like that. And we had actually, we learned our lesson not to do this again. But we had bought it on lease, which is why we'll never not do a dollar buyout lease again. But it was at the end of the lease term, the machine was going to be $40,000 to buy out the lease.
Okay.
And so the lease came to the end, and what we didn't realize from the leasing company was we called them about 40 days before we were ready to turn it in and tell them, hey, by the way, we're going to pay for this machine and we're going to keep it and such like that. And they said, well, unfortunately, you didn't notify us within 90 days, and what you thought you were paying, I think at the time was around $40,000 or $45,000, we're going to charge you $96,000 to buy that machine back. So we didn't think that was a really good deal, and we hadn't budgeted for it. So we were kind of in a jam, and we needed to make parts, and we needed to do that. And all along, and I think this is back in, I want to say around 1998, our engineers like, oh no, we do hogging and milling and we take big heavy cuts and we're milling chuck bodies and all that. We can't have a linear guide machine, and it's got to be Cat 50, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. And we said, you know what? Unfortunately, that's not in stock. That's going to cost too much right now. And so we begrudgingly almost bought our first VF2 because it was in stock, it was available. We dropped it on the floor and went. Now, the funny part about it is that it used to take us a couple weeks to get up and running, get things going, get ready, boom. Our guys, we dropped that on our floor, and the next day we were making parts. And we're like, okay.
Like,
and then
this is
a little too easy. What's wrong with this? And we realized that maybe our thinking and where we were, maybe didn't open our eyes up to, the options and the opportunities out there. Kind of fast forward that along, I think we've bought 19 or 20 machines since then. Multiple VF2s, we have VF5s, VF6s, ST10, 20, 30, 40, TL3, TMP3. Our very first Haas was about 7 years old and we were ready to trade it in. We kind of have a policy in the company. We like to keep our technology 7 years or newer.
Okay.
Because we figure that there's enough of a jump and a change in drives, controls, speeds, feeds,
everything,
things along those lines that really, and you depreciate it, that after 7 years you're going to get that payback just on an increase in productivity. So that first machine that I think we paid somewhere in the mid 70s for, once it was all optioned out, we went to go trade it in and we got $45,000 on the used market for it. So obviously it held its value remarkably, and every Haas since has. We bought a VF6 back in 2003 that we just traded in last summer for a brand new VF6, and it was basically one of those deals that it was still running to this day as hard and as quick as it could go. We pulled it out, we replaced it with a brand new one. We're up and running the very next day.
Yep. If you ask any Haas salesman what their biggest competition is, they'll say a used Haas.
Yeah. Haas is one of our toughest customers from that requirement. I also know that me owning Haas's does not get me any favors and
no, I was just going to say
internally
that's
at
totally
Haas.
Separate.
I will take if we don't deliver on time and if we don't provide a product at a fair price, we'll be replaced tomorrow.
Yeah.
With us in the work holding industry, we work with every single machine tool builder. So we're not trying to play politics or anything along those lines. We buy the right machine for the right job.
Right.
We have 1.25 meter VTLs. Haas doesn't make those.
Nope.
We've got history and we've got knowledge with all the machine tools and all the makers. And so you really kind of have to look to make sure, hey, it's the right machine for the job, it does the right thing. The one thing that I do love about dealing with Haas, it's made us more efficient, better, because the playing field here is level. Right. And the only thing that counts is quality and price.
That's it. Talking about customers leads me to what are some of the things about your products or just work holding in general that are either misunderstood by customers or maybe not maintained properly by customers?
Sure. We're heavily in the 80% range into rotational work holding. So most of the Haas machines and things along those lines that we're going to be working in is going to be in the lathe realm. We do stationary stuff and we do fixturing and all that, but that's more of a custom. Our standard product really gets into the rotational work holding. So some of the things that that we stress, and with the phone calls we get and the things that people don't do, just talking about this 8-inch chuck package that we have here. Guy's sitting down there and all of a sudden he calls up because he's not getting the clamp pressure that he needs, his parts are slipping, things along those lines. Customer says, I can't get this, you need to replace this hydraulic union. And this is inside the machine that actually this drawbar, this rotates, this is stationary, this drawbar pulls back and forth and opens and closes the chuck. Right. And so they think that it has to do with the power of the actuator. So they're always cranking up the pressure, they're overtaxing the hydraulic unit.
So the first thing they do is they go down to the front of the machine and they crank that dial all the way.
It's not holding apart, it's not doing this.
Yep.
Well, that does a couple of things. Number one, it just puts more pressure through the hydraulic unit and it creates more heat inside the hydraulic unit, which oil, the viscosity of oil sits down there, and as it gets hotter, it obviously thins out.
Yep.
So it's shooting so much more oil through, it's creating heat, it's doing all these things. It's not letting your hydraulic unit reservoir or chiller or anything catch up,
Right.
and you do continue to lose, hydraulic pressure.
I was saying, then that ramp
you
starts
doubled your
going
problem.
down. That's right.
You doubled your problem
Yep.
because you've sat down there and you thought initially what that is. The second side of that is it's taxing on bearings, and the heat is taxing on the hydraulic. This unit here doesn't have any contact seals. It's basically a big controlled leak, but it does have seals inside of it. And so all that heat, all of those other things, all that pressure then wears out those seals.
Right.
And so maybe you could potentially start to have leaking and different things along those lines. So like rip it off and take it apart. Well, one thing, number one, is that you don't have to do that. There are seal kits. You can just change the seal kits out, save yourself a little bit of money. But at the end of the day, what was really the problem? 99 times out of 100, it had nothing to do with the actuator, had nothing to do with the hydraulic unit, and it had everything to do with the chuck on the front side. But you're theoretically supposed to grease this chuck every 8 hours of operation.
How many customers do you think actually do that?
Probably none.
Okay.
And I'm just
kind
going
of
to
where I
tell
was
you,
headed with that.
from my own shop, if my PM guys are telling me they're greasing it every 8 hours, I know that they forget every once in a while. We understand that.
Yep. Yeah, because I think this is something that's really misunderstood.
Yeah.
Is when I grease it, what am I doing? Why am I greasing it?
Well, so obviously you have steel on steel sliding
Right.
parts, and you need that lubricated to keep things sliding back and forth and keep
and
things.
I think people understand that. That's the obvious
That's
one.
a normal grease process. But the other side of it is that when you continue to push grease through these jaws and through that, you're also the excess grease and the old grease is then getting pushed out.
Right.
And the higher the RPM, when you're running high pressure coolant, high RPMs, different things along those lines, you're boring through stuff. You're shoving coolant, chips, and all of that right into the face of that chuck. It's finding its way into every crack and crevice it can find.
I think that's the part that's misunderstood. Obviously, the grease, keeps the metal-to-metal surfaces lubricated, but it's pushing the old chips out.
Right. And so when you start to wear chucks out and you have what we call jaw lift, that's because maybe it's old, it's been taking a lot of pressure, and it's been pushing inside these slots and ways, but it's also because you've got all this material in there you've been grinding up. Now, what we were talking about earlier, when you're losing grip force and everybody's wondering what's going on, and they're like, well, all of a sudden, after 3 years, my chuck just isn't gripping what it used to be. I said, well, have you taken your chuck apart and cleaned it? No. Why would I do that?
Right.
And really, a good preventative measure would be to take these chucks apart. Depending on the material you run, you may want to take it apart once a month. And sit down there and you just clean all that out. You wash all the parts off. You put it back together. The most critical part about taking apart a chuck is that these jaws are in and matched in the set. So that's why they're numbered 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3. And you want to replace them in the same spot they are. But so you sit down there, this chuck will fill up with old grease. If it's not greased properly, it gets into a crust or a paste, a mud. It holds those chips in there. Then those chips grind along those steel to steel wearing surfaces. That's what creates jaw lift. Or just the fact that it's full and packed in there.
Right.
You can't compress it enough to get the grip force. So
And that's when they start thinking there's something wrong here, there's something wrong with the machine itself.
They start to see that. The first solution is 9 times out of 10 is not to take the chuck apart and look at it. It's crank the hydraulic pressure.
Yep.
Which just exacerbates the problem because now you're putting more stress on everything and you're wearing the internal parts out of the chuck.
Right.
Whereas if you just sat down there and said, I'm going to open it up, make sure that, we even have customers, if you're really smart, you'll go in there, you'll take off the greaser on the edge and get in there and get into your cleaning tank, and they use a little pipette and make sure they get all those channels cleaned out, blow some air through there, and make sure that those cavities are actually not jammed full of whatever material you're using.
So the 3-4 hours, I don't even know if it takes that long, that it would take to properly clean a chuck. I mean, it pays for itself 10 times over. And the reason we're making videos and we're talking about making a chuck video next with you is troubleshooting. Is one of the biggest things that we're trying to get, not only with our HFOs and our service techs, but even with customers,
Yeah.
Because if you're replacing one of these, your machine's going to be down for a while.
Right.
Where if we can teach them that, hey, maybe it's just a seal, maybe it's just a seal kit, maybe you're only down for a couple of hours.
Right.
And you don't have a service tech coming in there changing out parts.
Well, and I think that goes to speak to our market. And I think that, when we were talking earlier about some of the things that have changed over the years, people don't have smaller shops like us and people like that, whether or not you've got 2 CNCs, you got 20, you got 30, you generally don't have, a full-blown maintenance department of staffed of 3 and all that. So, the guy that's basically troubleshooting this and going through that is either the owner, is the programmer, is the operator, and
sure.
things along those lines. So, it kind of compounds on itself when you sit down there and say, hey man, I want to make sure that I'm down the least amount of time as possible because I got parts to deliver to our customer.
Exactly. It's the world we're living in now, right? If you want to know something, what do? You Google it.
Google it.
Right?
Yeah.
So, problem with my Haas LMC chuck.
Right.
And that's how people are going to start finding videos and tutorials and learning how to do these things themselves.
Yeah, and I think in the future, if we care, the whole AI and all of that, you'll have virtual reality. You'll be able to go on there, and take your phone and look at things, and it'll pop up what that part is, explode to give you an exploded view and a diagram. Say, okay, because we've had a lot of people that will sit down there and they'll start to take all these bolts off and think they're going to get to the seal kit, and they forget about this little set screw on the top, and they're pounding that thing off, and next thing you know, they've sheared that off, they've ruined the bearings and what have you. So it's not rocket science, but you just have to make sure that you got to know how to do it.
We've started putting videos on the control now.
Yeah.
If you get certain alarms, it'll automatically play a video.
Yeah.
And hey, here's a couple things you can check before you call your dealer, because it might be something really simple. Check these couple of things. And that's the way we're going. On that note, if somebody's got a Haas lathe and they've got LMC Workholding and maybe they're not getting the clamp force that they used to or that they expect, they can talk to you guys, right?
Absolutely. We're a resource just as well as anybody else when it comes in, and it doesn't even have to be necessarily an LMC Workholding product that you have. If you say, hey, I'm having a clamp pressure problem or things along those lines. It's a lot of times our service people and our customer support can talk you through a lot of those problems, say, here's what you should do, here's the easiest thing. We go on our website, you can pull up operational manuals if you've lost yours from the machine, or whatever.
Yep.
But in the same regards, I think one of the things we were talking about is that while this handles a lot, there are so many other work holding opportunities out there that people, you don't have to just think, oh, I can only do a 3-jaw chuck or that. There may be a better way to clamp it. So while a big majority of our business is the standard 3-jaw rotational or 3-jaw manual type chuck, there's a lot of other options. There's long stroke options, there's 4-jaw options, there's pull down features, there's different work holding pieces if you do a lot of shaft work. One of the things that we've done, a Haas video before at IMTS is showing what a face driver does, where you can machine a shaft in one operation without chucking and flipping it.
Right, we did that 2 years ago at IMTS.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, this has been great. We talked about a lot of stuff, and if someone wants to get a hold of LMC, they have a work holding question, problem, issue, whatever, how do they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of us would be the website, www.lmcworkholding, or you can call us at any time at 574-735-0225. You can dial 1 for sales, you can do whatever. Dial 0, maybe I'll pick up.
Okay.
But the website's a great resource, and it will drive you to where you need.
So lmcworkholding.com.
lmcworkholding.com.
Okay. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you like it, comment on it. If there's anything you want to see with regards to work holding.
Yeah, and I would just add that if there are questions that we didn't have and there are other videos you'd like to see, put that comment in there, and we'll look at seeing, hey, these are some great comments and questions, whether or not it be soft jaws, top jaws, what's the best thing to do. That's where we get our ideas.
Great, appreciate it.
Hey,
thanks for
Brian.
coming out.
Appreciate it.
We'll do another video on chuck maintenance soon.
Sounds great.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks.